Welcome back to BullionIQ, the channel where we go beyond the noise and break down what is really happening in the world of crypto, finance, and especially XRP. If you've been watching the market closely, you might have already felt it. Something big is coming. The movements we are seeing right now are not normal. Exchanges all over the world are quietly preparing for what looks like a massive wave of institutional demand for XRP, especially through ETF-related products. And today I'm going to walk you through the research, the signs, and the potential impact. So by the end of this series, you'll have a much clearer understanding of how much XRP is actually left on exchanges and what could happen if large institutions start buying in bulk. Over the past days and weeks, I have personally been tracking XRP movements across multiple platforms. What I discovered is seriously eye-opening. XRP has been moving in large amounts and not in random ways. Major exchanges such as Binance, Bitfinex, BitHum, Bybit, and Coinbase are showing unusual activity at the exact same time. When multiple global exchanges start showing similar behavior together, it is very often a sign of preparation for something much bigger than simple retail trading. This is not panic selling. This is not random speculation.
This looks planned, strategic, and structured.
One data source highlighted that XRP exchange reserves jumped by more than 1.2 billion tokens in just one day, which is the largest jump ever recorded. Binance alone reportedly saw an inflow of about 610 million XRP in a single day. Think about that for a moment. Large amounts of XRP don't just move like this for no reason. The big question is, are exchanges getting ready for a massive surge in demand, or are they positioning themselves for some kind of liquidity event tied to institutional products like ETFs? There are several ways exchanges increase their XRP reserves. Sometimes they buy directly from the open market. Other times they get XRP through OTC desks from other exchanges, large institutions, or even directly from Ripple Labs. Ripple still releases a certain amount of XRP every month from escrow, up to 1 billion tokens. However, most of that amount, usually around 70%, gets locked back into escrow. Only a smaller portion actually ends up in circulation, but if something big is being planned behind the scenes, less XRP might be sent back to escrow and more might be moved into the market for special partnerships or institutional needs. This is important because it links directly to one very powerful idea: scarcity. If XRP is quietly being absorbed by large players while retail investors are holding long-term, the available supply on exchanges becomes smaller and smaller. When demand increases but supply decreases, price pressure builds. That's basic economics. And that's where things start to get very interesting for price action. At the same time, there has been a noticeable trend of users moving their XRP off exchanges and into private wallets. This is usually a bullish sign. It means people are not trying to flip their XRP for short-term profit. Instead, they want to hold it and protect it for what they believe is coming next. So now we have two forces working together: exchanges building up reserves and regular holders locking theirs away in self-custody. This creates tension in the supply chain, which often leads to sharp price movement when a big trigger event happens. Another important point is the role of institutions. Platforms like Coinbase have reportedly been selected to provide crypto trading access to massive firms like BlackRock. That means any institutional client using services like Aladdin could potentially gain access to XRP in a regulated, familiar environment. This single connection opens the door to billions or even trillions of dollars, slowly entering the XRP ecosystem over time. So when you start putting the pieces together, it becomes clear that what we are seeing is more than just routine movement. It is preparation, it is positioning, and it could be the early signs of one of the largest shifts in XRP's history. In the next part, I'm going to dive deeper into how much XRP might actually be left on exchanges and why that number is far smaller than most people think. Now let's talk about something most people completely misunderstand: how much XRP is actually available for sale on exchanges right now. A lot of people hear big numbers like 14 billion or 16 billion XRP held across the top exchanges and assume that all of it is available to buy at any moment. But that is not true. A very large portion of what you see on exchanges belongs to individual users, long-term holders, institutions, or is locked in internal liquidity systems. That means the real liquid supply that can be bought instantly at market price is far smaller than what the public thinks. Several well-known analysts, including Jake Claver, believe there may only be between 1.5 billion and 3.5 billion XRP truly available on exchanges for immediate purchase. Think about that for a second. Out of a total supply of 100 billion XRP, only a tiny fraction is actually sitting there ready to be bought. The rest is either held by Ripple, locked in escrow, stored in cold wallets, or owned by retail and long-term investors who have no intention of selling anytime soon. We saw very clear evidence of this over the last few months. XRP was actually being drained from exchanges. People were sending their XRP to private wallets, hardware wallets, and long-term storage. This is normally a sign that investors are preparing to hold through a long period of growth instead of trading short-term price movements. But suddenly something changed. Massive amounts of XRP started moving back into exchanges in a very short time period. Binance jumped from around 2.9 billion to about 3.57 billion XRP in just 1 week. BitHum moved up to almost 2.5 billion, and Bybit nearly doubled its XRP holdings. All of this happened very quickly. Under normal market conditions, when that much crypto is sent to exchanges, the price usually drops because people are preparing to sell. But that did not happen. Instead, the price stayed stable and even showed strength. That tells us something very important. The new supply was being absorbed by strong demand. Buyers were already waiting. This is not what a bearish market looks like. This is the type of activity you see when large players are positioning themselves before a major move. So the next logical question is, who is buying and why are they buying quietly now? The strongest theory, based on current trends, is preparation for institutional ETF demand. If spot XRP ETFs become more common and available, these funds must be backed by real XRP. That means a huge amount of XRP needs to be bought from the open market and stored in custody by these ETF providers. They do not just use paper assets, they must hold the real thing. Let's look at the math in very simple terms. If XRP is trading at around $3 or $4 and even $10 billion flows into an XRP ETF, that could remove roughly 2 to 3 billion XRP from the open market. If there are only 1.5 to 3.5 billion XRP truly available, that means one big wave of institutional money could absorb almost all of the liquid supply. Now imagine what happens if inflows reach $20 billion. That number is not crazy when we talk about institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, or global investment funds. At that point, the amount of XRP left on exchanges could drop down to only a few hundred million, or even less. When supply becomes that tight, price does not move slowly. It jumps. Order books get thin. Sell walls disappear. Buyers compete with each other, and that is when the big candle movements happen, the kind that take price from single digits into double digits in a very short period of time. This is what people call a supply shock, when demand suddenly becomes much greater than available supply. In that situation, the price is not decided by logic or fair value anymore. It is decided by whoever is willing to let go of their XRP. And most people holding XRP right now are not interested in selling it for $5 or $10. Many of them are waiting for much higher levels based on expected real-world utility, cross-border payments, and future financial infrastructure. A lot of people in the crypto space like to say that even if demand increases, the price of XRP will not really move because of something called dark pools or invisible liquidity. They believe that big institutions are secretly buying and selling XRP in private markets and that this hidden supply can last forever. But this is one of the biggest misunderstandings in the XRP community. Dark pools do exist and institutions do use them, but they are not an infinite source of XRP. Dark pools are private trading venues where large investors and institutions buy and sell big amounts of assets without showing their orders on the public market. The main reason they use these systems is to avoid causing sudden price spikes or crashes. If a company tries to buy 500 million XRP on a public exchange, the price would explode before the order ever gets filled. That is why they use private channels, OTC desks, and internal liquidity networks. This helps them reduce market impact, but it does not magically create more XRP out of nowhere. At the end of the day, XRP is still limited in supply. There are only 100 billion XRP in total, and Ripple controls a large portion of it in escrow. Retail investors, long-term holders, exchanges, and institutions split the rest. Once someone buys XRP, it belongs to them. It doesn't just cycle back endlessly into the market unless they choose to sell it. So if institutions keep buying and retail holders keep holding, those dark pools will slowly dry up too. This is exactly why supply shock is such a real possibility with XRP. Big players can use dark pools at the beginning, but eventually the available sellers inside those private channels decrease. When that happens, institutions have to move to public exchanges to get more XRP. And when they do that, their buy orders become visible and start eating through the order books. That is when price starts making very fast, violent moves upward. Another important point is that a lot of XRP is already in very strong hands. There are only a few thousand people in the entire world who hold 500,000 XRP or more. Even fewer hold over 1 million XRP. When you compare that to the world population of 8 billion people, that number is extremely small. Most people missed XRP when it was under 25 or 30 cents. And even when it was cheap, a majority of people did not believe in it. They did not understand its utility, its speed, or its potential in the global financial system. Now imagine in the future when XRP is being used by banks, payment companies, governments, and multinational corporations. At that point, the media and the financial world will say, this asset was available to the public for over a decade. Everyone had a chance to buy it. That will be the official story. And while most people ignored it, a small group of investors, developers, and researchers actually paid attention. That is the group that is in position today. Another thing to remember is Ripple itself. Ripple releases up to 1 billion XRP every month from escrow. But most of the time, about 70% of that is locked back up again. Over the past many months, around 700 million XRP has been returned to escrow regularly. That means only about 300 million XRP actually enters circulation monthly, sometimes even less. If Ripple sees massive institutional demand, they may choose to release less into the market or handle distribution very carefully through private agreements. If Ripple reduces the amount of XRP entering circulation while institutions are increasing demand, that tightens supply even more. That is basic economics. Less supply plus more demand equals a higher price. And on top of that, many retail investors are moving their XRP into self-custody wallets for long-term holding. They are not sending it back to exchanges. This removes even more XRP from the open market. Some people say, I'm never going to sell my XRP. I'll just take loans against it in the future. Others say they will sell a small part at very high numbers and keep the rest forever. Everyone has a different plan. But the common theme is this: most people are not interested in selling cheap. That means the price will have to rise to levels that finally convince people to part with their XRP. And that could be much higher than most people imagine today. Now let's move into the part that really catches the attention of big investors. What happens when serious money starts flowing into XRP through ETFs and other institutional products? This is where the conversation changes from speculation to potential reality. Many people still think XRP moves only because of hype or retail traders, but that could not be farther from the truth. The next big move for XRP will most likely be driven by institutional capital, not social media excitement. When a spot ETF is approved or heavily adopted, it is not just a paper product. These funds are required to actually hold the asset they represent. That means if an XRP ETF sees billions of dollars in inflows, the companies managing that ETF must go into the market and buy real XRP to back those shares. That XRP comes from, you guessed it, exchanges, OTC desks, and private holders who are willing to sell. Now imagine just a small example. Let's say XRP is trading around $3 or $4. If institutions decide to put $10 billion into XRP through ETFs, that means they need to buy around 2.5 to 3 billion XRP. But earlier we already established that there might only be 1.5 to 3.5 billion XRP actually available and liquid on exchanges. That means a single wave of ETF demand could potentially absorb a massive portion of the available supply. And that is where the real fireworks begin. When supply starts drying up on exchanges, buyers are forced to increase their bid price to convince sellers to part with their XRP. If someone is not willing to sell at $3, the buyer has to go to $5. If that still doesn't work, they have to go to $10, then $25, then $50. This is how a true supply shock works. It is not slow, it is not gentle, it moves fast, and it shocks the market because suddenly everyone realizes there is not enough XRP to go around. This is also why we are seeing exchanges quietly increasing their reserves. They do not want to run out of XRP if demand explodes. They want to be prepared for high trading volume, more activity, and big institutional orders. At the same time, smart investors are taking their XRP off the exchanges. That creates a strange situation. Exchanges are trying to build up inventory, while long-term holders are pulling it out. These two forces are colliding in real time. Another important detail is that not all exchange-held XRP is actually available for sale. Some of it belongs to individual users. Some of it is sitting in cold wallets. Some of it is reserved for liquidity contracts. So while an exchange may show billions of XRP on its books, only a portion of that is truly liquid and available for instant purchase. That makes the supply problem even worse when demand surges. Think of it like this. There is a large lake, but most of the water is frozen. On paper, it looks like you have a lot of water. In reality, only a small part is usable. That is exactly what is happening with XRP. The numbers might look high, but the usable, sellable XRP is far smaller than most people think. Now let's mix in another factor: global adoption. XRP is not just for trading. It is built for payments, remittances, settlements, and liquidity for financial institutions. If even a small percentage of global money movement starts using XRP as a bridge asset, the demand could be enormous. We are talking about trillions of dollars moving across borders every single day. XRP does not need to replace everything to be successful. It only needs a small share of a massive system to become extremely valuable. And that is why this moment in time is so interesting. We are seeing the pieces slowly lining up. ETF conversations, exchange preparation, Ripple's steady strategy, increasing institutional awareness, and retail investors holding long-term. These are not random events. This is what early stages of a new financial infrastructure look like. Now let's focus on retail ownership and why it's such a critical factor in the XRP market. One of the most striking things about XRP is how concentrated ownership is. Out of the 100 billion XRP that exist, a large portion is held by Ripple itself, around 40 billion in escrow. That leaves a smaller fraction divided among exchanges, institutions, and retail investors. The reality is that retail investors, meaning everyday people like you and me, collectively hold maybe 1 to 2 billion XRP in total. That's it. When you think about global adoption, billions of people could potentially want XRP in the future, but currently only a tiny number actually own it. Even within retail ownership, there's another layer of concentration. Only a few thousand people hold 500,000 XRP or more, and far fewer hold 1 million or more. Most regular investors own far less, maybe 50,000 to 100,000 XRP. This creates a unique market situation. When institutional demand explodes, the available XRP for sale from retail is extremely limited. Essentially, the market could experience high demand with very low immediate supply, which is exactly the scenario that drives rapid price increases. Think about it from the perspective of large institutions. They are looking to buy millions or billions of dollars worth of XRP. If retail holders are not selling and exchanges have only limited liquid supply, the institutions are forced to compete for the XRP that is available. Each successive buyer pushes the price higher, and this is why many analysts are predicting a potential parabolic price movement when ETFs or institutional flows start hitting the market. At the same time, long-term holders and investors are increasingly moving their XRP into self-custody wallets. This is another key factor. When XRP leaves exchanges, it is effectively removed from the liquid supply that can be used for trading or ETF fulfillment. In other words, the more people take XRP off exchanges and into private storage, the scarcer it becomes for new buyers. Exchanges can refill their inventories, but that can take time and depends on Ripple's monthly releases or other institutional sales. Ripple's monthly releases are a big part of this story. Normally, Ripple releases up to 1 billion XRP per month, but about 70% of that is relocked into escrow. Only a fraction of that becomes available for general trading. In combination with retail withdrawal and institutional accumulation, the amount of XRP freely circulating on exchanges is far lower than what most casual observers assume. This is why current market dynamics are so compelling. A small number of XRP in circulation, combined with large institutional interest, sets the stage for potentially explosive growth. It's a supply and demand problem, but unlike traditional assets, the scarcity here is magnified because the holders are highly concentrated, and the remaining liquid supply is very limited. Another interesting point is the psychological aspect. Many XRP holders have no intention of selling until they see significant gains, often thinking in terms of triple or quadruple digit prices in the future. This creates a situation where there is upward pressure on price, not just from institutional inflows, but also from scarcity created by patient holders refusing to sell. Finally, let's consider what this means for the average investor watching the market. Understanding supply and ownership concentration is key. If you are new or even experienced, knowing how little XRP is actually available to buy gives you perspective on potential price swings. This is not just about hype or speculation, it is real-world supply dynamics. Now let's tie everything together and look at what all of this means for the future of XRP. We've already covered how exchanges are quietly building up reserves, how retail investors are moving XRP into self-custody wallets, and how institutional interest is growing. When you combine these factors, you begin to see a clear picture. XRP is entering a phase where supply is tight and demand is increasing dramatically. Institutional adoption is perhaps the most important driver here. ETFs, large-scale fund allocations, and bank-level trading access are all on the horizon. Spot ETFs in particular require that every share be backed by actual XRP. That means billions of dollars flowing into these funds translate directly into billions of XRP being bought from exchanges or OTC desks. Considering that only 1.5 to 3.5 billion XRP may be truly available on exchanges, a single institutional wave could absorb almost all liquid supply. That creates a perfect environment for price spikes. Another factor is the psychological mindset of current holders. Many XRP investors are not looking to sell unless the price reaches triple or quadruple digit levels. This creates a situation where demand could far outpace supply, causing a cascade effect. Every new buyer in the market would push the price higher because there simply isn't enough XRP available to satisfy everyone at lower prices. This is why some analysts are projecting potential multifold increases in XRP's value once institutional flows begin to hit exchanges in full force. Ripple itself plays a critical role in all of this. Their monthly escrow releases are carefully controlled, and most XRP is relocked immediately. Any institutional or strategic sale is typically pre-planned, meaning the market doesn't see sudden spikes from Ripple itself. Instead, the price movements we're likely to witness will be driven primarily by buying pressure from institutions and investors, combined with limited circulating supply. Let's also talk about dark pools and private trading venues. While these are used to move large amounts of XRP without publicly affecting the price, they are not unlimited. Eventually, if demand continues to rise, even these private channels cannot satisfy buyers. That's when institutional participants have no choice but to purchase XRP directly from exchanges, which is exactly when the price is likely to skyrocket. Retail ownership concentration is another important factor. Only a few thousand people hold hundreds of thousands or millions of XRP. Most retail investors own far less. This concentrated distribution means that when supply is absorbed by institutions, retail investors could be left scrambling to buy, further intensifying upward price pressure. All of these dynamics, limited liquid supply, rising institutional demand, concentrated retail holdings, and careful management of XRP by Ripple, create an environment where a significant price surge becomes highly plausible. The combination of scarcity, preparation by exchanges, and anticipation of ETFs could potentially drive XRP from its current price into levels that were previously considered impossible. Finally, it's important to remember that this is not financial advice. Nothing we discuss here guarantees results. What we are doing is analyzing the market from a professional perspective and sharing insights about trends, supply dynamics, and potential institutional activity. By understanding these factors, you can make more informed decisions and recognize the signals that may indicate major moves in XRP's future. In summary, we are witnessing a unique alignment of forces: exchanges building reserves, retail investors holding, Ripple controlling supply, and institutional interest increasing. This combination sets the stage for one of the most significant moments in XRP history. Whether you're a long-term holder or an investor considering entry, understanding these dynamics is critical. Stay observant, stay informed, and keep a close eye on the market because the next few months could be truly transformative for XRP and the broader crypto ecosystem.